what do we do? Oh, we are recording. All right. So what do we do? Our primary goal is to safeguard the welfare of study participants. That's job number one. But as part of that, we obviously have to also assist researchers and help the institution with different things. The IRB makes determinations. They can approve, disapprove, or require modifications to human research. We monitor active projects, and we can suspend or terminate approval if something's going wrong and there is a safety issue going on. We have the ability, or if it's just being really poorly run. Sometimes there's not a safety issue. Sometimes we just through random auditing will find that things are kind of a mess. And we will have what we call a regroup moment where we'll suspend the study for a short period of time and help get them back in compliance. And we also have a duty to investigate allegations of non-compliance that come in either to our office. Sometimes we get participant complaints that we have to look into as well. Okay, so this is, I think, the most important part for you guys to know in your role is really what has to come to us. And I think for the most part, you guys do a great job of being able to identify or kind of smell if it's going to be human research. And know that I'm always here for you to consult with if you're not sure. I think, in my opinion, over the last 6 years I've been here now, or I don't know, 6 years, I've seen the OSP group go from not really knowing anything about human research to really, you guys are really able to spot it and help investigators really kind of get in early. So I appreciate that about you guys. But this is what has to be met in order for it to come to the IRB. It has to be research, okay? Research is a very broad term. You guys obviously deal with research of all flavors. Human research has a very specific definition, and this is what it is: a systematic investigation designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. So kind of vague. Sometimes it's hard, especially if groups are doing kind of contract work to do quality improvement or quality assurance or do program evaluations. Sometimes those are research, sometimes they're not. So those are the ones that are a little bit in a gray area, and I appreciate conversations about these things when we're trying to figure it out. It never hurts to submit to the IRB, but at the same time, we don't want researchers to have to go through that process if it's not absolutely necessary. So it has to be research under this definition, but it also has to be using human subjects. So they have to be alive. They have to be about the person. So they have to be collecting information about an individual or individuals through an intervention or an interaction. That doesn't have to be in person. It can be online. Or they're getting private identifiable information. So sometimes what you guys see is, and I actually got an email about this from a PI, is sometimes PIs want to work with restricted data sets, and you guys will see data use agreements coming through OSP for those. They may or may not be funded, but they're restricted access. So sometimes they say they want the IRB to sign off on those, sometimes they don't. So sometimes people submit to us and we make a determination that doesn't require IRB review, and that's sufficient for them to submit to the person. So it's a little all over the place. So I'm happy again to talk through that if you guys see something coming in that looks a little wonky. We have tools online, not just for our researchers, but for you guys to use to help kind of work through whether it involves human research. We have flowcharts as well as a more text heavy document, and those are all found under our guidance documents on the website. So your PI needs to go through IRB. First time's always the hardest, right? So always refer them to our website. We have a lot of information on our website for researchers. We do consultations. We have all of our workshops and dates on here. So really this is the best place to lead them. And if they click on this researcher link right here, we have all kinds of guidance documents there. We have our researcher handbook. We have the IRB submission checklist, blah, 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 blah. So always refer them here. From there, they can reach out to us directly if they have additional questions. As you guys know, some of our researchers are a little more seasoned than others. So, you know, and some just always have a hard time with this no matter what. So that's what we're here for. So when they submit, they're going to submit through IRBnet, which is a separate database, and they create their own username and password. We have a checklist available that helps them navigate what documents are required. And now we've been working really hard to do training videos and get those online. So we now have training, just a couple on there, but we're working on it. One is actually how to submit an IRBnet. So it kind of walks you through that process. And then one is more one of our workshops that we do in the spring and the fall. And that's online now as well for people. So we don't get a lot of faculty going to those, but sometimes they could use that, just saying. All right, so training, you guys are probably familiar with this. If they're going to submit to the IRB, they have to have the CITI, Human Research Protections training, not the responsible conduct of research training, not the institutional official training, not all the other trainings that are in CITI, but they need to take the Human Research Protections training, and they just do it once every 3 years. They also need to submit a COI disclosure to Sue's office if they're going to be submitting human research. If they did an annual disclosure, that's sufficient. But if they have students or staff on their project, they may not realize that they also have to submit COI disclosures. Who needs to be on the IRB? Really only people who are interacting with participants for the purpose of research or actively collecting data or getting informed consent, or who have access to identifiable research data. If they're just getting a de-identified data set, they don't need to be listed on the IRB, and they don't need to do the training and the COI disclosure and all that. So that's important to know as well. Okay, post-approval monitoring. So once they get approval, this doesn't really impact you guys so much, but we do kind of keep an eye on things. So once they get approval, that's not the end of us. We do random monitoring on active research, and we kind of pick it randomly in a sense, but we do kind of focus on federally funded projects, as well as projects that may involve children or some other vulnerable population. And now we're really making an effort to start looking at studies that invoke FERPA and fall under FERPA law. And we're trying to take a look at those to make sure those are in good shape. So we do that. And then study closure, that's something I wanted to remind you guys of as well, is to help guide your PIs of when can they close the project with us. Some people think they have to keep it open until they publish their very last paper on the research. That's not the case. Once all of the data collection is complete, or once they have done working with identifiable data, they can close the IRB. So the sooner they can de-identify, the sooner they can get rid of us and just submit a closure to us and move on. And then they can still work with the data as long as it's de-identified. Okay, so I'm just going to mention this briefly. You guys saw an announcement that came out from Dr. Fisher about Streamline. So this will be a big adventure for all of us, obviously. The IRB has been chosen as the first to go. So we are quite excited about that prospect. So, I think in a way it's good because it's a smaller space. We'll be doing a lot of training with our end users. Of course, those are going to be human research people, so we won't be reaching everybody. So you guys will still have a lot of training to do on your end, but at least the human research people will be familiar with the concept of Streamline and know how to log in, right? So we are going to work on instructional videos, but the tentative go live for the IRB, very tentative, is May of next year. And then I believe the rest of the modules will follow probably in the fall-ish. Knock on wood, everything goes well. So stay tuned for that. It's a huge change for all of us. it's exciting, but it's a little scary too, but we'll get through it. And hopefully the researchers will embrace the new system and not rebel. Okay, so that's all I have. I'm going to stop there. I just quickly want to ask, does anyone have any IRB related questions they want to ask before I turn this over to Sue? No, not a one. Awesome. Okay. Sue, I'm going to let you take it away.
You're going to let me take over now? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Sue Marker. I recognize some of the names on the little boxes here that I'm looking at my screens. I do handle the conflict of interest, as most of you probably know. Currently, we're a one-person office for conflict of interest, or one staff member, but they will be adding another staff member in the future, hopefully, which will, make things maybe go or not be such a load, I guess is what I should say. So I'm going to share my screen. We're obviously dealing with conflict of interest in research, and the purpose of the COI disclosure is to protect the integrity, the trust, and respect of UNM, and it also protects the investigator. I'm sure if you read the papers at all, there's a big story recently out of APS where they had a staff member who had an ownership interest in a business and had not disclosed that to APS. And so one of the outcomes of APS investigation into that is that they're going to beef up their conflict of interest disclosure process. So it is to, protect the institution. It is to protect the investigator so that if there are any disclosed interests that need to be managed, that they can be, correctly dealt with. Conflict of interest is inevitable if you're in a research institution. And so it doesn't imply that there's anything wrong. It's just, let's, get everything out on the table and let's take a look at it and see what needs to be addressed and what doesn't. So the first step of the process is going to be, of course, the disclosure submissions. And some of the basic questions are, number one, are you engaged in UNM research? If the answer to that question is no, then you don't have to go any further. You would not need to submit a disclosure. And that our definition is based on what it is in Faculty Handbook Policy E110, which does deal with conflict of interest in research. And what it says is that it's a systematic investigation and it contributes to generalizable knowledge. It includes basic and applied investigations, and they are funded by or through UNM, in which case OSP is going to be involved in that process. It's conducted at UNM regardless of funding, and then if it's non-sponsored and conducted off campus by UNM employees. So once the question is answered, are you engaged in UN research? Well, then the next question is, are you a research investigator as defined under UNM policy E110? And that definition is essentially, it's any person, regardless of their role or their position just position or status. If they're involved in the design, conduct, or reporting of the research, they should submit a COI disclosure. Now, I know Linda mentioned that for IRB purposes, I think there was something that if they're involved with the participants, then they have to file IRB and then they'll check for COI, where our definition for investigator for the COI process is a little broader, and that's simply anyone, like I said, who is involved in the design, conduct, or reporting in the research. You can have investigators that are UNM investigators. There can also be outside individuals, like Linda mentioned, the same with IRB. Non-UN investigator is one, again, who's responsible for the design, conduct, or reporting of UNM research, and they're employed by an entity other than UNM. They can be working as an independent contractor or collaborator also. So in the bottom line is they're not employed by UNM. The purpose of the COI disclosure, and again, I referenced that earlier, is to protect the integrity, the trust, and respect of UNM, the investigator, and then the objectivity and integrity of research. And to comply also, there's the federal regulations and guidelines, which if you work with OSP, you know that those can vary from agency to agency. And then also sponsors have their own rules or guidelines. And there are several, for PHS purposes, there are several private entities and nonprofits that actually fall under PHS guidelines. And that would be like PCORI and the Susan B. Komen Fund for the Cure for Cancer, those types of entities. So the conflict of interest disclosure, what we're looking for is the questions that the investigator is going to be asked is whether or not they have any outside interests. And these can be in the areas of intellectual property, can be family collaboration and research. Another area is equity interests, which would be things like investments, where they would have control over the investment. It would not include like mutual funds, where the fund is the one that controls those investments. And then business ownership, it can also, disclosable can also be board memberships or positions, consulting activity outside of UNM, so those types of things. And again, the conflicts don't have to be eliminated in their entirety, but it is important that they be reviewed by the COI committee and then to see what type of management might be required or in order, I should say. So the timing for the disclosures, we send out an annual call for disclosure, and that is in August. That may change. Linda referenced the streamline process that's going to be implemented. So depending on what that entails, it may not, we may need to change that annual call for disclosure, or it may just be changed. It can be submitted, the disclosures are open year round, so it can be submitted anytime during the year. And on our website, there are links to the 3 disclosures that we have for UNM main campus. And again, our office only handles main campus disclosures for main campus research. So we have the annual disclosure, we have the PHS project specific disclosure, and we also have the material change disclosure. The material change is one that's filed when they have previously submitted either a PHS or an annual disclosure, and something has changed in their situation or in their research. So they're updating their record. And so I just went over the types of disclosures. The PHS disclosures are submitted at the time of applying for funds. The annual disclosure are also supposed to be submitted in August and then at the time of proposal submission. So we have that on file. The reason for having it done a proposal is so that if there are disclosed interests that need to be reviewed by the committee, we have ample time for that review to take place and to put things in order if there's any action that's needed. So the first step in the disclosure process is to complete the online opinion survey. And then we look at those surveys that are submitted every day. And so there's an initial review by our office. If there are disclosed interests, then we will send those disclosures or compile that information, and we will have a meeting with the COI committee for them to review them. Once their decisions are made, then we send out determination notifications by email. The COI committee consists of 6 faculty members, excuse me, 2 UNM administrative people, and then 2 outside community members. So we have a good, the goal there is to have a good set of individuals that are looking at it from different perspectives. And the faculty members currently we have some from engineering, some from the College of Arts and Sciences, one from the College of Education, one from CASA. So we have a pretty broad sample in the faculty members currently. The disclosures decisions that can be handed down or made are that the disclosable interest, after taking a look at it, it doesn't seem to constitute a conflict of interest with the research that the individuals involved with. If they determine that there is a potential conflict of interest, then there can be a decision memo, a stipulation, or a management plan. The difference between the two is that the management plan will have an individual appointed to be the monitor. And there will be, they will have closer oversight over the conflict or the potential conflict of interest. With the decision memo with stipulation, it goes to the PI and basically says the COI committee sees that this could be a potential conflict of interest, but we feel it can be managed this way. And if there's somebody else that the committee feels needs to be apprised that the decision memo has been issued, then they will be CC'd on that notification. So we're on to the PHS and NIH funded research. Obviously, PHS is Public Health Service, NIH is National Institutes of Health. As we've discussed before, those disclosures are due at the time of the proposal submission. And they have the same definition for investigator. It's any person responsible for the design, conduct, or reporting of research. So depending on the project and the assigned roles, the need to submit the COI disclosure can go well beyond the PI or a co-PI. Also, newly added investigators during a project, the progress of the project, they have to submit a disclosure as well, and that should be completed within 30 days after they start work on the research. Again, the process is similar. We review it and we process them. We'll send them to the committee if they're interested, need to be reviewed by them. The determinations are made and the notifications sent out. Additionally, there can be, depending on what the committee decision is, there can be reporting requirements to PHS, NIH, and our office would handle those notifications. Some of the major agencies under the PHS are the National Institutes of Health, and they have several affiliated agencies. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control, SAMHSA, which is Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services, Indian Health Services, and there's a listing on our website of all of the agencies and all of the, even the private entities and nonprofits that we know of that follow PHS and NIH guidelines. That can be sort of fluid, so those can change over time. So this numbers, the total number of disclosures we processed during academic year 2021 were 2,659. So we do get a fair amount of activity that well. For this year, for the annual call for disclosure, we sent out about 2,600 invitations or notifications that the disclosures were due. So in summary, our program is handled out of the Office of Research and Compliance, and I am the compliance specialist. The director is Anna Tomlinson, and on our website, we do have information on access for COI, for research integrity, for training resources, safety and compliance links, and then also we have a link to the IRB too, so, and export control. So that's the summary, that's the entirety of mine.